The world as we know it has changed drastically over the past 6 months in particular. Chaos seems to be the order of the day. Above all, hanging over all of our heads like the sword of Damocles are President Trump's tariffs against all countries in the world, and time is running out. In early July, we have the deadline, the 90-day suspension deadline for all countries to have struck a deal. But so far, no one struck a deal, and it's very difficult to figure out what to talk about with Washington, and what does President Trump actually want, and what do small countries, smaller economies like ours have to offer in the way of negotiating. So to discuss all this, I have with me a person who is an expert in international trade relations, and that is Subhashini Abeysinghe, research director at Verite Research. Good evening and welcome back, Subhashini, to our program.
Good evening.
Right, Subhashini. Now let's take the early July deadline. Is this a serious deadline? Now we were told 44% tariff for Sri Lanka, and then we were all told, every country was told, okay, it's 10% for now, and your country-specific tariff will come in 90 days. But is this 90-day deadline really set in stone? Because I don't see any country having made much headway in striking a deal, which is what President Trump calls it. Trade deals are not struck in 90 days. They're not, it's not like going to the shop and buying something. So is this deadline really happening, or can we expect another month or two, or 6 months or whatever?
So given the current trend, like you said, President Trump wanted to conclude these negotiations pretty fast. He was quite confident in being able to do so. He thought the U.S. market attraction and appeal of the U.S. market would compel countries to come forward and sign an agreement with the United States. But it is quite clear that every country has their own domestic constituencies, their own national interests, and concerns that they need to factor in. And therefore, it is definitely proving, even for somebody like President Trump, who's referred to by some as a master deal maker, right, that it is quite challenging. Like you said, no significant trade deal has been forthcoming up to now. So the expectation, of course, one thing you have to say is, with President Trump, it is very difficult to predict any of his actions. He's one of the most unconventional people that you will come across, who uses extremely unconventional methods in
You're
his
being very
policy,
generous there.
right? So therefore, it's very difficult to actually, everybody would say, predicting what President Trump is going to do is one of the most challenging things to do. But given the current trend, one could expect realistically that there'll be an extension of the current deadline, because it is unlikely that the major trade deals, I think what is very important, like President Trump says, is once their major trade deals of the larger trading partners is concluded, that it will be relatively easy to introduce maybe a standard package for others. But until those trade deals come through, the extensions is likely to take place. But yeah, for countries, and even President Trump himself has been saying, we realize we can't individually meet and negotiate with over 100 countries. That's why he has been saying, for most of the smaller countries, they will send a tariff letter. They will send a letter saying this is what the United States expects from countries, which is exactly what countries are trying to figure out. Like you said, what can we offer in return to get these tariffs removed?
Well, first of all, you mentioned the term master deal maker, which that's his self-professed expertise. He keeps talking about, we're going to make a deal, we're going to make a deal, but he's not a master negotiator. He's not a diplomat. And when it comes to international affairs, whether they are talking about foreign relations or trade relations or whatever, or even military alliances, it takes diplomats, businessmen who are schooled in international trade. It takes legal minds. I mean, what's going to be in the contract between the agreement between two countries, and so on. And it also your domestic situation also has to be taken into consideration. So many things. You just cannot just sort of, take a paintbrush and say the whole world is black or white. It doesn't work that way. So him being a master deal maker is something which is open to question. I myself believe he's more like a bull in a china shop, in which case, how do you negotiate with a bull in a china shop? And again, you mentioned that we need to know, we need to find out what Washington wants, and it would be great if they would send that letter to all the countries and say, well, this is what we want, because so far we really don't know what he wants. We know what he wants from China and from the EU and perhaps from India, but what does he want from Sri Lanka? Right?
So there is another way to look at this issue. I always tell, for countries like Sri Lanka, where you have very little bargaining power, you can do very little to change what is going on in the world. You are just at the receiving end of what is happening. So I feel like maybe where Sri Lanka needs to focus more for a small country like us is, what do we need, right? And in this context, I personally feel sometimes for countries like us, trade negotiations, you can also use it to your advantage to do some of the reforms you need. For example, United States has for a long time has been compiling a list of trade barriers that every country has, which restricts ability of US businesses to function in those countries. For example, one of the areas that US one of the trade barriers or barriers to business that the US has identified consistently is procurement. They have said, look, Sri Lanka doesn't follow an internationally competitive bidding process. They go for unsolicited proposals. That prevents US firms from being able to participate because it's government-to-government deals or uncompetitive bids. And these are, for example, areas that even Sri Lankans find hugely problematic. It's not about US businesses.
Absolutely.
That Sri Lanka needs to reform, right? So I always feel, if you look at certain things, that maybe certain reforms are actually win-win. They may be beneficial to both countries. So it's not a bad idea to make use of this opportunity to do the basically long delayed reforms. The second one is, for a country like Sri Lanka, I think we need to sort of understand, it has been for a long time, Sri Lanka has realized Sri Lanka is over-reliant on Western markets. That the United States and the European Union account for over 50% of our exports. And that we are over-reliant on apparel, that we are losing our competitive edge because Sri Lanka is no longer cost competitive in manufacturing, labor-intensive in sectors like apparel. So we've long realized that we need to diversify away from apparel. So, but we have never really had that push, the drive, the urgency to do these things. I feel if we actually make use of this opportunity to say, actually, this may be a good wake-up call. We always knew this is one of our weaknesses. We should not be relying too much on these markets. And one of the most important things that Sri Lanka should have done that we failed to do. We are in Asia and we always boast about our strategic location. And you know, Asia has been the fastest growing region in the last 20-30 years and has been one of the largest markets in the world. And we are in this strategic location connecting Asia, that we connect to Asia so well. But we have never had a strategy on pivoting to Asia, or look, like India, for example, had Act East Asia or Look East Asia. Other countries have Asia strategies. But being here, we are not exporting enough to Asia, and we've not been able to get a lot of foreign investments from Asian countries like Korea, like Japan, like China, and we have never really had a proper strategy to trade and invest more with Asia. So I feel like maybe sometimes these kind of shocks that we face forces us to act. Otherwise, we are very complacent. We are very happy to go along with what we have. So I feel maybe this is an opportunity for us to rethink, and actually, if we make this opportunity and act right, maybe we can turn it into, convert the challenge into an opportunity.
Well, also, I think it would be a good idea if we impressed on President Trump and his negotiating team that we're doing these reforms, and sort of pitch it as if we're doing it for them. Instead of the fact that we need to do these reforms, if we say, well, you've impressed on us the need to be more fair by the US, and so we're going to do these things, and we'll have internationally competitive bidding and all that, which actually is something that's a basic that we need to do. But also, when you say we haven't been capitalizing on the Asian markets, what is it that we have to offer Asia? And this is a strange thing about Sri Lanka. We're not very good at identifying new products which the consumers want, and then changing our processes and training our people and getting the technical know-how and starting to produce that product. Instead, what we do is we've got these products which we've had for hundreds of years, and we want other countries to buy it. So tea, tea, rubber, coconut, it's tea, rubber, coconut. We haven't actually done much with it, and we expect the world to buy our tea, our rubber, our coconut. And then, of course, apparel was the one success story, but again, we haven't taken the next step upwards. Apparel was 35 years ago. We haven't developed much from that. But the world has changed. 35 years ago, where was Microsoft? Where was Apple? Where was Google? TikTok, Twitter, whatever. These are companies which identified human needs and wants and capitalized. And now they're the largest companies in the world. We don't do this very well, do we?
So I think there are different ways to think about it. One of the most important things to understand is in the last 20 to 30 years that even developing countries were able to be part of automobile manufacturing, telecommunications, instruments manufacturing, even plane manufacturing, by simply being part of a larger production network. So you're not producing the entire car, you're not producing the entire mobile, you're not producing the plane, but you're actually producing vital parts that goes into the production of these items. And with this, what we call these global production networks or global value chains. And these value chains emerged in Asia quite a lot, because in those 30 years up to maybe around 2010, the world actually saw a drastic reduction in trade barriers, significant improvement in efficiency of transporting goods across countries, reduction in shipping costs, and a lot more predictability in the trading environment. And also the digital technologies really facilitated this integration, because it was very easy to seamlessly monitor production happening in factories across different countries as if you would do in a single country. So you could manage a production chain. Now we are seeing this entire thing reversing. But actually, in my view, this reversal may often bring opportunities, because earlier Sri Lanka missed that view. Like you said, Sri Lanka often, just like we are today, engrossed with not only our products but our own problems. So we always had domestic firefighting, which occupied all of our energy, all of our resources, leaving very little for us to be looking at the world and developing our industries. And hopefully we will not do the same mistake today, because even today we are very engrossed in how do we come out of this crisis and going to make sure that our recovery is sustainable. Because to make the recovery sustainable, being able to export and bring in more investments remain critical. So why I'm saying today you're seeing the trade barriers increasing. You're seeing the shipping costs being very volatile. The predictability from it was not just the pandemic, but the Red Sea attacks. All of this makes transporting goods less predictable and subject to a lot of shocks. And what is more important is technology that several decades ago encouraged integration, now is encouraging fragmentation. Because today the technology conversation is a lot about we don't want to depend on another country for this technology. And as a result, we are seeing the world economy fragmenting. And these supply chains will get reshuffled and redrawn. They will be looking at new locations, new investments, new places. And that itself gives an opportunity. A very good example that I would like to see this opportunity that comes to Sri Lanka again with strategic location is India, right? So we missed Japan's rice. We missed China's rice. The question to ask is, India is at our doorstep. Are we going to miss India's rice as well? Are we also going to be like we do now? Just from Japan, we borrowed, but we didn't bring in FDI and exports. From China, we borrowed a lot of money, took a lot of loans. We didn't bring in FDI and exports. And India, you could see a similar trend. We seem to be borrowing quite a lot. But actually, we need to refocus, because India has become a center of attention to everyone. It is the fastest, largest market that is growing the fastest in the world. And Sri Lanka has this opportunity if actually India's manufacturing gets picked up, right? If the India manufacturing really starts growing fast, I can't think of a better growth opportunity for Sri Lanka than that, simply because of our Colombo, the location, the connectivity. We can offer so many logistics, trade, transport solutions to companies that want to invest, manufacture and export, right? So that's why I'm saying there are opportunities. But like you said, it is very important for us to be able to constantly monitor and understand these opportunities and rework our strategy to see how can we now make use of this opportunity.
Now, we in Sri Lanka, do we really understand markets? Because we tend to look at countries with preconceived notions, prejudices. Oh, the Chinese are like this, the Japanese are like this. The French, the Germans, the Americans, the Indians. I mean, we look at them with different lenses, but we hardly ever use a marketing lens. Now, if you talk India to most of our policymakers, the politicians, whoever, they're not looking at India as a market. The conversation invariably becomes a political one. The 13th Amendment, the Indo-Lanka Accord, that kind of thing. We're not sort of looking at, oh wow, there's this huge, we're living next door to a huge market. We don't seem to understand that. Why is that? Are we just bad salesmen? What is it with Sri Lankans?
So I think with India, you need to understand, especially the current geopolitical tensions, the China-US rivalry, that is playing out in the world is actually also is affecting the Indian Ocean region. Right. So this geopolitical rivalry and competition especially becomes very critical for countries like Sri Lanka, as India also gets drawn into this competition. And to the extent India becomes US leaning, it becomes very, very important for Sri Lanka to be mindful of this national security and bigger geopolitical considerations. And Sri Lanka can never overlook the national security concerns of India, given our geographical location. And that is, and these growing tensions means that becomes even more important and predominant in our relationship, maybe overlooking economic engagement. The security lens will sort of can actually, sort of be hinder our economic engagement, definitely. But at the same time, I think Sri Lanka needs to, we have for too long thought of India as a challenge or a threat than an opportunity. So what I'm saying is, of course, we live in a world where we don't want to be overly reliant on any market. Nor do we want to be overly reliant on India. But there is a lot of untapped potential in India. And when I look at India, I'm also talking about, I think our ability to supply to India, like you said, is higher because whatever said and done, the South Asian region, we are culturally, our consumption patterns, our history, our culture makes us similar. Although we have a lot of problems among us, a lot of mistrust among us. When we go to a country, from food to dress to religious practices to everything, there is so much similarity, and you can connect with an Indian, Bangladeshi or any other South Asian person far better than you would with anyone outside the South Asian region. And to me, like you said, this is the best ability for us to be able to develop products that can actually meet the Indian consumers' needs, because we should be able to understand and connect with them far better than anyone else. There was this discussion we had recently at an event we held called Riding the Indian Wave, right? We wanted to see, can Sri Lanka make use of the opportunities that is emerging next door? And there was, during one discussion, there was Parsilon, one of the Ayurveda, luxury Ayurveda brands. But he was also saying is, look, unlike a Western market or any other market, in the Indian market, yes, there are lots of challenges, but they understand Ayurveda. They value Ayurveda. It's easy to, you don't have to, it's much more easier to convince them of the benefits of Ayurveda. And that itself makes it a better market for us to go into, as opposed to introducing Ayurveda in a country where Ayurveda is not as well understood and respected, right? So that is why I'm saying, of course, India is a very challenging market, not just for Sri Lankans. Everyone finds India a challenging market, but everyone also understands it is one of the biggest consumer markets. And we need to, if you want to increase your exports, you need to be there. So Sri Lanka needs to overcome that mindset of constantly viewing India as a threat, but actually seeing India also as an opportunity and working to help our companies succeed better in India.
Food for thought indeed. We need to take a short commercial break. I am in conversation with Subhashini Abeysinghe of Verite Research. Don't go away, we'll be right back.
We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
ඔබ වයස අවුරුදු 10 සිට වැඩි නම්
සුවිශේෂී නර්තන රිද්මයන්ගෙන් යුක්ත නම්
ඔබේ හැකියාව රටට පෙන්වීමට හොඳම වේදිකාවයි මේ.
ඔබ සමාජිකයන් 15 අතර කණ්ඩායමක් සමගින් අදම අයදුම් කරන්න.
Sirasa Dancing Star.
නිෂ්පාදක සිරස ඩාන්සිං ස්ටාර් තැපැල් පෙටිය 100 රත්මලාන. WhatsApp 071997788.
Far from the city noise, under a mango tree, Children turn broken desks into a stage. They sing, they dance, they try. No bright lights, no big crowds, just a small school and big dreams. Change is coming. An open-air stage for the Kattaragama Primary School. Gammatta, for the people, by the people.
දේශපාලනයේ මතවාද, මත බේද, මත විමසුම් සහ මත ගැටුම්.
ජනාධිපති අරමුදලේ සල්ලි අරගත්තු කට්ටියනේ.
විරුද්ධ පක්ෂයේ മന്ത്രിවරු ෂෝ එකක් දාන්නවත් මාධ්‍ය සංදර්ශනයක්වත් නෙමෙයි කතා කරන්නේ.
ගරු මන්ත්‍රීතුමා මට දුන්න මයික් එක. ගරු අසන්ත
සර් මෙයාට පිස්සු. කේලම් කියන එක මම නැවතුවා.
උතුරේ ලුණු දකුණේ ලුණු කියලා ලුණු නෑ බොස් හරිද? රටේ ලුණු තියෙන්නේ.
ලාංකේය දේශපාලනයේ පෙරලිකාර අදහස් සමගින්
ආණ්ඩුවට විරුද්ධව 50%ට වැඩිය තියෙන හැමතැනකම අපි විපක්ෂය ප්‍රාදේශීය බලය පිහිටුවා.
අපි ටර්න් එකක් ගැහුවේ මහා මැතිවරණයේදී.
දැන් අපි මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ නෑ අපි මේ පොඩි මිනිස්සු කියලා කියමුකෝ. මාලිමාවේ ඕනිම අයියා කෙනෙක්. කිච්චි බච්චි බිට්ටි බුට්ටි ඕනි කෙනෙක් එක්ක එන්න.
නරියා මිදිවැලේ තියෙන මිදි කන්න පැනලා කිව්වලු අල්ල ගන්න බැරි වෙලා කිව්වලු ඇඹුල් කියලා.
දිනෙන් දින උණුසුම් වන දේශපාලනයේ අවසන් කැපුම. ෆයිනල් කට් unedited. සතේ දිනවල රාත්‍රී 7:30ට TV1 ඔස්සේ.
Let's move on with WeForce. Together for a better tomorrow. Join us at the University of Kelaniya on the 23rd of June 2025.
Send us your application with your name, your unique talent, your phone number. To Sri Lanka's Got Talent PO Box 100 Ratmalana or WhatsApp us on 076 599 7788.
Welcome back to Face to Face. I'm in conversation with Subhashini Abeysinghe, Research Director at Verite Research, and we're discussing the international trade relations situation. Now, Subhashini, we in Sri Lanka, it is a point that you made to me, we in Sri Lanka, our exports weren't doing well over the past decade or even more. We are not Vietnam, we're not Bangladesh, we're not Thailand or Malaysia, which are success stories in exports. And before that, of course, South Korea, Taiwan, Japan and China and so on. We're not successful when it comes to exports. We'd like to be. Many governments say we need to do this, but we don't actually do much to turn the country into an FDI magnet, to get that investment in and boost our export capacity. Now, we saw over the past few decades, Vietnam, Bangladesh, they did it. They decided this is what we're going to do, and they went ahead and did it. But our governments, if you look at the past 5 or 6 regimes, never really did much to facilitate this, except for rhetoric, which is easy to come by. So what do we need to do to turn this around? Because now international investors also have short memories, because right now they would say, oh, Sri Lanka, that's a mess, it's so difficult to invest there. But that's what they said of Vietnam, say 30 years ago. But now within a few years they said, oh, Vietnam is the place to invest. And it had nothing to do with democracy, that they're not a democracy. It was just simply that the conditions were made right for investment. How do we do this? Is it a mindset thing again?
No, I think what is really important for Sri Lanka, we are We are good at setting targets. In 2010, we thought we'll double our exports from 10 billion to 20 billion. But even today, we are at 13 to 14 billion, right?
These are just numbers plucked out of the air.
So now we are saying we are going to, actually, targets are important. But what is important, what is lacking is when we set a target, we need to create a robust plan and a strategy. You can't set a target and not have a proper plan to achieve it, right? And in the current context, we need that kind of strategic thinking more than ever, because we live in a highly unpredictable, volatile world. And in this kind of environment, actually, even for investors, are very cautious about moving their money. So right now, because you don't know how the world trade will basically emerge, what kind of trading patterns will survive, what trading relations will get disrupted. So you have anyway investors thinking of like, let me wait and see, right? So you're anyway going into you're in a time period where opportunities for growing exports and opportunities to bring foreign investment is less compared to before. Right? But at the same time, Sri Lanka needs to understand, even when we had plans. So one, we most of the time didn't have robust, comprehensive plans. Second, even when we had plans, maybe on ad hoc initiatives more than plans, we didn't implement them. A good example is when you want people to come and invest and trade, one of the most important things that you need to consider is the cost and time of getting goods out of the country and getting goods into the country. Because today's exports is not about manufacturing everything here. Most of your inputs, machinery, raw material come from outside the country. So import and export procedures, how efficient, how transparent, how predictable they are, remains critical for Sri Lankan businesses to get into exports, and for foreign businesses to want to come to Sri Lanka to manufacture or manufacture for export. So Sri Lanka for a long time, Sri Lanka started discussions on automating the border procedures and making them more efficient and transparent. Somewhere in mid-1990s, it was called EDI, Electronic Data Interchange System.
I vaguely recall this.
And today, we are in 2025, 30 years. But we do not have fully automated, connected, a single window. We call it a national trade single window. And every successive government's budget speeches, if you look back, had it, including the new government's maiden budget speech, also promised a national single window. So one of the critical things for us to, if we are really serious about export growth, is to think about how do we, one is really having a good, robust plan, making sure that it is very aligned to what is happening in the world. Not, you can't do it in isolation from what's going on in the world. And thirdly, making sure that we get these plans implemented. Another very important thing when you talk about investments, exactly like you said, when investors come, they want to be able to get the approvals fast, get access to land fast, start their operations as fast as possible. If they're being sent from post to pillar, and if there is a lot of delays in getting approvals, getting registrations, getting all of these things, then investors would wonder, why do we want to be in Sri Lanka when I can get much faster approvals, much more efficient processes and systems in other countries in the region? So we have, again, for a long time has been talking about this one-stop shop for investments, where you actually get all of these processed approvals done, everything, faster. But again, this proposal would have appeared for over a decade in budget proposals and budget speeches of the government, but has not made much progress. So we need to understand, this is why we are saying we can't think of, if we get the 44% tariff President Trump has imposed out of the table and get it reduced, that we will be fine. That's a big mistake. We will not be fine. We have not been fine. And we really need a lot of homework. We have a lot of homework to do. We have a lot of things that we can do at home, which will actually help us, make us ready to be able to make use of opportunities. So right now, I feel like we are not ready to make use of opportunities because the cost of doing business is high, cost of trading across borders is high. Another big problem is significant policy inconsistency, that our taxes, tariffs, all of these things, change very frequently. So how we really address this kind of constraints that prevent Sri Lankan businesses from succeeding abroad, from being competitive abroad, remains critical in my view. While there is a lot of focus on Trump tariffs and the trade negotiations, I feel we need to focus a lot more about what we need to do.
So you mentioned that in virtually every budget, these grandiose plans are there, one-stop shop and all that. But every year, the government has an excuse. Mm-hmm. We had the war. So the war was an excuse for a quarter of a century. Of course, other countries have wars, and they do go forward. But this was our excuse. Then global recessions. That's another excuse. Then we have pandemic, and it's as though the rest of the world didn't have a pandemic. It was just us. So yes, everyone else had the pandemic, but they got over it, and they kept going. Maybe for a year they had issues, right? But we still talk about the pandemic. That's an excuse. And then, of course, our economic debacle is another excuse. So we have all these excuses. And now, is Donald Trump our latest excuse?
That's an interesting way to look at it.
What I'm saying is, in a year's time, at the next budget speech of this government, are we going to hear this, that because of Donald Trump, we couldn't do this and do that, and but meanwhile, other countries have done various things. Is this our latest excuse?
I hope not, because I think I agree that we do have excuses, and we do try to, because we are not very good at implementing things. We are good at proposing things, but we are not. But we can't continue in this path. We need to. That is why I say that maybe US tariffs and maybe our inability to export to US will sort of force us to focus our minds, right? So sometimes even if you look at Europe, right, people say that actually the Donald Trump policies and how his approach to the European Union actually brings European Union together. Earlier they had a lot of diverse views. They were not very united, but all of a sudden there was a reason to come together, to be more united and to sort of iron out the differences. So similarly, sometimes these shocks and these problems can my hope is that it will at least give a wake-up call and make us realize, look, we cannot be complacent anymore. And the recovery from the crisis depends a lot on us getting our growth, economic growth. We can't, it's not on debt restructuring. It's not getting our deficit right. None of that will, if you want sustainable recovery, where you don't get into a similar crisis, where you would not default again, you need economic growth. And how would growth come? You need trade and investment for growth. So there has to be a conversation in the country around this, and I hope that this current situation will be a driving factor to make us think about it.
Are we addressing it? Because last year, during the election campaigns, so many politicians would say, well, there's stability now. And their definition of stability was, well, we don't have electricity breakdown, shortages, power cuts. We've got petrol and diesel, we've got gas, so that there's stability. The cost of living has stopped skyrocketing, inflation rather, has stopped skyrocketing. So we've got stability. So we were fooling ourselves, and invariably in any discussion it would become political. Oh, it was that government or this government and so on. But we don't bring into the conversation this element which you just spoke of, that it's not about the IMF, it's not about the debt restructuring, it's not about having petrol at the petrol shed. It is about growth, especially industrialization and our exports. We sort of tiptoe around that subject, don't we?
I think what people need to realize is even the petrol and the diesel and the electricity, if you go for another crisis, you will all of this stability will go away, right? But what is very important for a country to think about is stability. More than stability, Sri Lanka being able to grow and offer better livelihoods, better living standards, better incomes for its people. So Niresh, at the end of the day, even today, most Sri Lankans are seeking better lives outside Sri Lanka. Anyone who can is trying to go outside, thinking that in Sri Lanka I'm not going to have this life. So I think for me, what Sri Lanka should strive to do is actually create that kind of economy that where people feel that I can actually aspire to live a better life and have a better income and better living standards here, right? And a better education, better access to health. All of these things will come with proper economic policies, economic strategies that lead to growth, and creating sectors that can generate that kind of jobs. And that is my main concern with tea and apparel. One of the main challenges when I hear the debates in the tea industry about us not being able to pay 1,500 or 1,000 rupees, you get the feeling that Sri Lanka needs to diversify into sectors that can actually offer better jobs, because these sectors constantly rely on low cost, low skilled labor. And these sectors can't also retain labor. People are moving out of these sectors and they are going to Middle East, going to other places. So really our economic growth strategy, our export strategy, investment strategy in my way must ultimately translate into Sri Lankan people having better jobs, better lives and better incomes.
So that's an interesting point that you brought up, that we need to look for new industries, not the old tea and apparel and rubber and all that. But we do have some industries which offer a lot of promise, but we seem to ignore those. For example, ports and shipping. Wonderful port in Colombo, but we for many years ignored the fact that we need to continuously upgrade it. We neglected it, and then whatever money we had, we spent on building a new port in Hambantota, which is a tiny port. It has no capacity anywhere close to Colombo. So it was just an exercise in futility, and we did the same thing with our airport. When you fly into Katunayaka to BIA, it's like it reminds you, oh my God, this is third world. Whereas if you fly into Bangkok or Kuala Lumpur or Chennai, you're impressed by the airport. From up there, when you look down, you think, oh wow, this is a big airport. And that symbolizes the country. But we had plans to expand BIA. I remember seeing these plans as far back as I think 2008, 2009. And that money that airport aviation had was sunk into Mattala. And so now we're talking about, yes, we need to expand BIA. So are we just continuously shooting ourselves in the foot instead of, I mean, we have the opportunities right there.
So I think I agree with your point, because Sri Lanka's, the location we boast of, will not deliver economic returns unless we invest in the right infrastructure, right technology to convert this location into an economic benefit for the country. And I agree that is where we have failed. One of the main problems in Sri Lanka, which we are trying to fix today through our legal reforms also, is we don't have a properly assessed, evaluated public investment program, which prioritizes the investments that Sri Lanka needs to undertake aligned to Sri Lanka's economic strategy. And in this connectivity, our ability to connect rest of the world with the Indian subcontinent and Indian subcontinent with the rest of the world, not just the Indian subcontinent, but Indian subcontinent, Middle East and Africa. We have this ability to connect them with the world and the world with them. But that requires us to, like you said, invest and maintain state-of-the-art port infrastructure, logistics infrastructure, state-of-the-art airports. And that is why the failure is we've not critically prioritized our infrastructure investments, and also we have not had this alignment between these infrastructure investments and overall economic strategy. And we've never prioritized connectivity as one of our greatest competitive advantages to attract investments. Nilesh, when you look at Vietnam, we often compare ourselves with Vietnam, but I also want to tell people, don't fool yourself to think that you can be Vietnam. Vietnam is a country that is 5 times the size of Sri Lanka. You take the land area, you take the population, their labor force is 7 times the size of Sri Lanka. So we are talking about 10, 20 industrial zones. They're talking about 100 industrial zones. So the scale, it's not comparable, right? But we do have a competitive advantage that most other countries don't have. That is our location. That is our ability to connect. And that is one of the reasons why investors would want to look at Sri Lanka, despite us not having the labor advantage that India, Bangladesh, or any other country has, or the land, abundance of land that these countries have. But they may want to come here because I can connect with so many markets if I locate in Sri Lanka. And that is what we need to sell.
Absolutely. And we are almost out of time. So one final question. The issue of land for investment is something that many people are bringing up now, including the government, saying there's very little land available. Even if investors come, if they want, 1,000 acres or whatever, we don't have it in one contiguous area.
So I think one of the issues with land, Sri Lanka has a very inefficient land market. Even though we say 80% of Sri Lanka's land is owned by the government, it is owned by multiple agencies from the government. I can remember, even if you want to develop a logistics park, somebody was saying part of the land is owned by Ports Authority, part by Railway Authority, part by Road Development Authority, and releasing that land because railway will have its own plan on what they want to do with that land. Road Development has its own plan, and Ports Authority. So even releasing government land, to projects is very difficult because we have a very fragmented and inefficient land market, and we have not properly mapped how much of our land should we be preserving for forests, how much on culture. We have a lot of overlapping demands and requirements. So one way many countries, this is not unique to Sri Lanka, so one way many countries try to overcome this is by these industrial zones, export processing zones. So you actually create a zone that to overcome this land market inefficiency, not just the land market inefficiency, you can't just have a bare piece of land and put a factory. You need to have proper electricity. You need to have proper waste disposal facilities. You need to have proper water facilities. So you need to have proper transport access, road access. Now, in small countries like Sri Lanka, developing countries, we don't have this kind of high quality infrastructure across every part of the island. So we create this zone to make sure that this zone will have this infrastructure, these facilities, and then it is about giving land from the zone, which is relatively easy. And the problem in Sri Lanka is, what we have studied is actually for about 2 decades. After that initial phase of developing zones, we have had a lot of proposals, lot of initiatives, but we have not actually constructed good zones. Yeah. And what is unfortunate also is Sri Lanka has gone down the path of 100% public investments in zone construction and management, which, you know, it's not what is happening in other countries, in Vietnam, in Thailand, in other countries. It is, these zones are constructed and managed and operated by private sector, not by the government. We've never had the kind of regulatory framework to enable that kind of private investments. So government inevitably doesn't have the money, right? So they never actually develop them. And when even the existing ones, they're poorly managed, right? But the new ones, that has not materialized. And as a result, when investors come, the existing parks, especially the ones that have the best infrastructure and better access, are almost operating at capacity.
So much food for thought there, but that's an excellent idea which the government should consider, having privately run zones, as many other countries do. So a lot of good ideas and a wonderful discussion. Thank you very much to Subhashini Abeysinghe, Research Director at Verite Research. Thank you for being with us this evening, and thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away because the news is coming up next. Have a great evening.